Hello, my name is David Hyde. I have painted since childhood and I've always been interested in wildlife and birds. Many people find the thought of painting a wildlife subject quite daunting. This need not be so. I would like to show you how to paint a complete wildlife picture using a series of simple step-by-step stages. Yesterday I was at the Cambridgeshire Raptor Foundation, which is a bird of prey sanctuary near to where I live. The beauty of this place is that you can get close to birds. But not only that, birds themselves are used to people being close to them, and they will remain perfectly natural and relaxed. When taking photographs, there's a couple of things to remember. First of all, don't be worried about backgrounds. They're not important. What's most important is a natural or interesting position the bird might be in. Some birds will be behind bars or netting in cages. These are a little bit more difficult to photograph because the light will be lower and of course the obstruction of the netting will be a problem. More interesting subjects to consider will be the birds perched on blocks or bow perches. These will be out in the open with no obstructions in front of them. Unfortunately, they'll only be a few inches or a foot or so above the ground. It's awkward when you're photographing from a standing position in that you will always be looking down on your subject, and this is not necessarily a good thing. It's far better to get your camera low down so that you're looking directly at them or even slightly up at the birds. This will give them a much more natural look in your painting. I find modern digital cameras particularly useful. It's a good idea to take many pictures, and then later you can select the one or two that'll make useful paintings. From the 30 or 40 pictures I took, I've selected this one of a male kestrel to form the subject for our painting. The first stage is to produce a detailed drawing from our photograph. But don't worry, the simplest way is to enlarge your photograph to the size you want in the painting. I've done mine in my computer, but it could be enlarged with a photocopier at your local stationer's. Once you have the picture, tape it firmly to the board so that it won't move. With the photograph in place, I take a sheet of tracing paper and hinge it at the top with two more pieces of masking tape. It is important that your drawing's accurate, so take a sharp pencil and take great care with the outline and the detail you're going to trace. This may take a good half hour, even more. Don't worry, time spent here will pay dividends during the rest of the painting. You don't have to worry about including shading, but it is important to get all the markings accurately drawn in their positions. Once the drawing is complete, you need to include one or two things that aren't on the photograph. The first thing I've done is to add some feet. You can use your other photographs as a reference for this. I've then gone ahead and started to put a little bit of background for this painting. The next stage is to transfer our drawing onto our painting board. We will position the bird to suit our composition, and using masking tape, we'll fix it in position. Between our tracing and the board, insert a piece of trace down paper. This is rather like carbon paper, but is coated with wax-free graphite. At this stage, we do not need to transfer all the detail onto our board. I would simply draw the outline. I paint on MDF, which is easy to get and it has a smooth surface, but it needs sealing with a gesso acrylic primer. Okay, we now have the drawing on the board. We can start painting, and we'll start with the background. This is a winter scene, and we'll have snow in the foreground giving us a lighter tone at the bottom, and the background will be darker. This will allow us to show the rim lighting of the sunshine around the bird. We begin by mixing some dark background colours: burnt umber, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna and yellow ochre. I don't use white, and I use a little bit of water just to get the paints to flow. Being acrylic, I just put my colours on my plate as I need to use them. China plates make good palettes, as their shiny hard surface means that the acrylic paint won't stick to them. Now, I don't paint thickly at all. I block in quite rapidly the areas that are going to be dark. And the reason for not putting the detail on the Kestrel is that I will simply just paint over that line. It's easier to do that and have a fairly free feel to the background than it is to try and carefully paint round an outline. This will only leave an obvious brush mark. I'm roughly leaving the branches so that I have an indication of where they are when I come to do the next stage. Don't worry if you completely lose some of the outline drawing. Remember, we still have it on the tracing paper, and we can simply put it back once this layer of acrylic is dry. The bottom of this is going to be lighter. In fact, it's going to be snow, but the last thing we want to do at this stage is to paint it white. I use ultramarine with some crimson. This is Liquitex Naphtha Crimson. If you don't like that and feel it is either too blue or too red, add a little yellow ochre into it and it'll just grey it slightly. Right, when we're happy with the mix, I'm just going to dilute it with a little water and paint this just in the back. Where the distant vegetation is finished and the snow that's laying on the ground is taking over. Now this will appear dark, too dark in fact, but remember this is just an underpainting. The snow has to be painted on top of this in order for it to be effective. But one thing I do like to do is to use my brush stroke to convey a feeling of shape that the mounds and ridges of the snow are forming. So we just need broadly to put this in. I'm painting with just an oil painter's hog bristle brush, and bristle brushes will leave more of a textured brush mark than a synthetic acrylic brush will do. But it is important to get the feeling of what the snow in this case is doing by using your brush mark in a nice, vigorous, sort of creative way, rather than just applying the paint as you would do if you're painting the kitchen door. That's the background completely painted in. It would be a good idea though, while we're waiting for that to dry, just to tone down this area here. And again, any dark colour will do, so that we don't entirely lose it against our background. I'm going to make this a touch lighter with some yellow ochre. It's the tone more than the colour that's important. Having it a little lighter so that we can see what's going on is fine, and it'll just take the tone of this away from that bright white. As this is coming forward, I'm just going to strengthen the tone, just scumble in with this. Don't be worried about your brushes. It's more important to get this lovely feeling of texture. Just push the paint in, almost a vertical pressure on your brush to make the bristles splay and produce a sort of a random mark. We've finished the underpainting. The most important thing to do now is to let it dry.